Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Einav Avni. I am an energy healer and alignment coach. And this podcast, Healing Conversations for Anything Chronic, is mainly here to help bring the message of possibilities. It is possible to heal yourself naturally. And I hope that there is something here today that helps you, take all this journey a little bit forward. Today in the studio with me, I have Paula Tobey. Paula, welcome. So lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Nev. I'm excited to finally be here. We've arranged this a while ago, and then it changed a couple times, but I'm so excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too. Me too. Really excited to engage with everything that you have, all the wisdom that you have. So let's get started and tell us something about you.
Sure. So I am a former teacher. I am certified elementary and early childhood both. And I knew when I was 9 years old that I wanted to be a teacher. However, it was a challenge for me because I have a form of dyslexia called dyscalculia, and it's a math disability. And it's essentially like the inability to solve equations. Like, that's really what you sum it up to. So don't ever ask me to do long division because it will not be correct. Or algebra. That's really bad. But anyway, so along that journey, I struggled a lot in school, but I learned a lot. And essentially, my parenting journey is where I learned the most. So from the time when I was a kid to when I was a teacher to when I was a parent wasn't a huge span of time. But over that period of time, I had a lot of things that I learned and a lot of things that I discovered I wasn't doing well. I was doing incorrectly. Also, it affected my health and my mental health. And that really plays into the whole story of what I help educate women about, which is the gut-brain connection, and how important it is for us to eat healthy foods that fuel our body so we can think more clearly and think faster and do better, and essentially help get rid of chronic conditions that we may suffer from, like learning disabilities, autism, dyslexia, all of those things. And how when you heal the gut, you can also heal the brain. So that's what I teach.
Amazing. Amazing. I mean, as soon as you say the gut brain connection, it's like, wow, okay, there's so much there, right? I mean, I have a lot of questions, but maybe we should start with really what is unusual about the gut brain connection? Why is it not something that anyone understands immediately, or what are the challenges around this gut brain connection?
That is a great question. So honestly, I think that it really started becoming known in the 70s. So, and I was just watching a webinar on ADHD, and in that they came up with the label of ADHD in the 60s. It was 1968 that they discovered this phenomenon of children that act like squirrel crazy, and that's kind of how they labeled them. And they just talked about the evolution of the diagnosis over time. But anyway, what they found was that a lot of those children had poor diets. Now, we all know most children have poor diets. What do they love to eat? Chicken nuggets, French fries, pizza, that kind of thing. Why? Because most of them are loaded in lots of sugar, and sugar is addictive. It's like a drug to the brain, and it can screw up the messages that are being sent from the body where you're digesting to the brain. So the gut, the messages can get lost in translation along the way to the brain. And some people actually kind of suffer from that more than others. That part, they don't exactly know why, but they do know that it happens to run in families. So it's usually inherited. For my example, my dad is dyslexic, I am dyslexic, and my daughter is dyslexic. Now, my other daughter is not. My husband happens to be on the other end of the spectrum, and he was labeled gifted and talented, and that's what my daughter is. So I have both ends of the neurodiverse brain for children. And that in itself is a challenge as a parent. But anyway, all that to say, I think that what makes it so interesting and important for us to recognize is that it affects our overall health and well-being. And for some people, it affects it so severely that their life cannot necessarily be free of pain. And they either have emotional pain or physical pain. And sometimes it's both. Sometimes it turns into those chronic conditions like fibromyalgia or other things that cause a lot of, unforeseen things. And so when you look at someone and they get their tests done, they look healthy, and yet they're complaining of having pain and all this stuff. And they're finding that there has to be some sort of a connection between the gut working properly and not, and the messages getting to the brain in a correct fashion. And what we do know is the better we eat and nourish our bodies, the better our brain can think and function. And that's just plain and simple. And they've known that for forever. I mean, I believe Hippocrates figured that out when he said all disease begins in the gut. And they've known that forever. Now, the reason why, honestly, is pharmaceutical companies and people, big corporate like that, they know that they can't really make money when we eat better, and they can't give us drugs anymore. So it does kind of come down to that in a lot of ways. And so the whole idea of healing oneself naturally is a threat to a lot of places like that. And so I think that's the overarching issue. And we have to decide when is enough. Like when are we done? When are we sick and tired of being sick and tired?
Sick and tired,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So for you, if someone came to you and said, I have this condition, be it chronic or not, I guess, or maybe more specifically when it's chronic, how quickly would you test the gut?
Well, I often would ask the kinds of things that people are struggling with, right? So what are some of the conditions? Now, I work with parents and their kids, or work with the parents to work with the kids. So it's kind of both ends. But essentially I just ask questions, what kind of foods do they normally eat? How long does it take them to eat? Do they go to the bathroom regularly? All of those kind of medical-ish questions. And that's a basis. And then from there, we can kind of decide, is their body responding normally, or maybe adversely or abnormally? And if so, it might warrant maybe a food sensitivity test or something like that, because in those kinds of tests, it's a blood test, and it can show how reactive your blood is to a certain food or ingredient. And it can these tests can test, hundreds of things. The most common ones they test for like 96 different types of foods. There are definitely some more complete that test hundreds. But it can really give you an idea as far as how the blood responds to that food by essentially showing you in a bar graph form how reactive you are or not to it. And they just use red, yellow, green as an indicator. And so that's one of the things that and then you take that information and you remove those foods that are in the red, and lo and behold, almost always people see improvement, and then their problems disappear. And that's actually exactly what happened to me. And this is why I'm teaching this, because I used to suffer from migraine headaches and joint pain and chronic IBS. And they were issues that essentially kept me parenting on the couch. I would often describe myself as no better than a mom who had a drinking problem. I was often having to sleep off headaches. And, when the migraines are so bad that you can't stand, laying down is what it is. And my girls often were playing in the background while I had to sleep off a migraine. And for years and years, the doctors and neurologists told me that it was, just you have migraine. It's migraine, and that's all it is. Take this medicine, you'll be fine. And I was never fine. It never really worked. And then a few years later, I had my rock bottom moment, and essentially a really bad headache led me to not pick up my daughter from kindergarten on time. And when I showed up, she was in absolute tears, and she thought I forgot about her. And I was like, no, baby, I never would forget. Like, I was trying, and she knew how sick I was. And that was my wake up call, that I knew I had to get a hold of my issues. And so I stopped teaching. I had been working part-time teaching at a preschool, and I stopped that. And I just full-time dove into healing my gut. And I did a food elimination diet. And I did a lot of learning and research. And that is when I came upon the book that changed my life forever. I have it right here. I like to show it if this ever gets aired. It is the Gut and Psychology Syndrome. And this book is what changed my life. You can see I tagged many things in it. And essentially, it's natural treatment for ADHD, ADD, all the things, depression, autism, dyslexia. And so when I'm reading this book, I'm reading myself on the pages, and I'm like, oh my word. And then much later, we have many family diagnoses of cancer of the gut. And there's so much family relation and overlap that at that point, I knew it was a familial digestive issue that was passed down. And I had a responsibility and a duty, not only to get myself healthy, to break that from happening, but then to educate other women.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very happy that you did that, that you're doing that, and that you're bringing this to the table today, because I think yes, in a lot of the conversation that I'm having with people say yes. The doctors at some point recognize that the food is probably, well, actually no. Most of the conversation I'm having with people is when the doctor says food has nothing to do with healing.
Right.
And then the person I interview always say, well, I decided that it can't be so. And then they take on this research and realize that, yes, food is exactly what is contributing to a lot of the problem. But still, I think what you're basically saying, and it's so important, because I think that a lot of us don't really recognize how much influence the gut has. And even if they understand that the gut has got some influence on how they're feeling, it's so complicated and so complex. There's so many different things that can, so many things that we can really dive into and see actually, what does it actually mean? I mean, so the gut-brain connection feels at the minute, when I'm thinking about all of these different things, like a very umbrella term. And now we need to start kind of diving into all of this. And of course, into my mind comes intolerances and people, especially on chronic conditions and all the medications that they're on. So they have a lot of constipation and a lot of really foods, I guess, that falls under intolerances, but foods that they don't recognize how it impacts their body. So for me, when I'm hearing you describing this, I did a test because what is it called? It's a life. Ugh, I was doing that. Yeah, anyway. I did get this red, green, and yellow thing, and it was really interesting for me to see that most of the foods that I got on the red section was they were fairly healthy, but the things
Yep.
that I was eating all the time
Yep.
is like I was like, okay, what do I do with this now?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but what is something? So I mean, this lifestyle. Damn it. I have I have that test that I was doing here, and so people can do this kind of intolerances test, and I think that's
Hmm.
very recommended. What else can people do to see what it is that they actually have going on?
Yeah, so the blood test, in my opinion, is easier. It's in black and white, or in color, right? You can see just how the blood responds to that item. I did it with a dietitian through an elimination diet with that blood test. So what that meant was we started with the foods that came up red. We took them out of the diet. Actually, it was more extreme than that. We took out essentially all the foods in my diet, and only I could eat the things that were green. That
Right.
when I first got that test done, it was only 17 things. It was like I was on an episode of Survivor, and my basket came and I had 17 things in it. And one of them was lima beans. And I grew up hating lima beans. And I was like, are you kidding me? There was everything else. I was like, okay, I can eat that. But I was like, how? Ugh, gross. And my cousin was awesome. And she's like, well, what about hummus? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I hadn't even ever made hummus by that point in my life. She's like, yeah, you just soak them, let them plump up, put them in a food processor and stir it up. And it's a creamy dip. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I could try that. And
Right.
believe it or not, I did, and I liked it.
So this is what we call chickpeas, right? That's the
Chickpea, yes. It is exactly the same idea. They're little green pea looking things that are just like chickpea. Yeah.
okay, got it.
Yeah. Anyway, so I learned a whole new way of cooking and living by having to eliminate everything. And then after I did well for 2 weeks in a row, I could add back some more things and then some more. It took me 7 years to have the guts to add back in the things I was most reactive to. And what I mean by that is if I had an immediate reaction and it was like a headache guaranteed, I was not willing to eat it. And
Mhm.
it was very easy for me to draw that line. Now, the worst part was I'm already a small and petite person. I lost a lot of weight, and it was not like unhealthy, like I wasn't skin and bones, but I'm already small, and so it was challenging. And at that point, I could wear kids' clothing. Like that was kind of embarrassing, you know. And my kids have their daddy's jeans, and they're nice, big, sturdy girls, and they were like up to my shoulder already, or a little lower, but not much. And I was just like, I can't believe I can shop in the same store with my kids. But anyway, so then later, I knew I really should start adding things back in because I was getting older and I did not, as a 38-year-old woman, want to be wearing children's clothing. So I knew I needed to start adding things back in and, put on a little bit of weight. So I did. And then when I would, you call it challenge, when I would challenge those, I would write down what happened. And so I just kept this food diary. And I knew that certain foods cause certain issues and what caused what thing. And so knee pain was from gluten, and IBS was from heavily processed meats or meats that are like fatty, like bacon. I loved bacon, and so I had to stop eating bacon. Um, and for me, the worst was oatmeal. I love oatmeal, and that was a migraine cause. And it's because I loved it. I ate it so often. I craved it that was part of why I
Mm.
didn't have it. And so having those cravings is a indication often that kids and adults can have a sensitivity to that item. And I say kids because we know their palate is a lot less extensive than ours. And so if they're only ever eating chicken nuggets, that might be an indication. And often the three biggest are wheat and, gluten, specifically, sorry, gluten, dairy, and shellfish. Those are the biggest allergens that we know of. And shellfish seems odd, but mostly because that kind of a fish is a bottom feeder, and they're essentially eating the junk that's on the bottom of the ocean. And that's why it's considered unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are allergic to shellfish tend to have that anaphylactic reaction, right? It's usually very extreme. However, gluten and dairy in different people can be as minor as a little rash, right? Bumps on the arm, or, and so you don't even think about it, because we have never been taught to think of our whole body working perfectly, and then the idea that things can actually be related. And that was what my learning journey was about. So I was having knee pain and joint pain on my whole right side. I had knee pain. I had elbow pain, like tennis elbow. I didn't even play tennis. I was like, this is crazy. Like the knuckles on my right hand were always sore and tight, and and then of course the headaches. And essentially, when it all comes said and done, it's inflammation. Inflammation is the root of all things. That's the first thing that happens in the body when it doesn't like something, when it's encountering reaction. And that's what's happening in the gut. The gut becomes inflamed. And when that happens, we're not properly absorbing the nutrients that is needed in our body. And we're also then having a response to this reaction. And so that's where the rash or headache or all that stuff comes from. It's the body's response to say, hey, warning, I don't like this, something's wrong here. And then the more of those we have, the more chronic conditions build up, the more we get. And so it really does come down to figuring it out. The food diary way is the harder way. If I can ever recommend to anyone to do a blood test, I highly recommend those. They are more affordable today, and now they're actually, many of them are over the counter. So here in the US, we have CVS, Walgreens, Target, and they carry a brand called Everlywell. Now, Everlywell is also online. I've been an affiliate with them for years, and that's how I used it with my clients. But now they can get them in Target. And so if you are shopping and you're like, oh, food sensitivity, wow, you can take it home that day, mail it off, and get your results a week later. And so for me, it's a no-brainer.
This is what I did. Mine was also a blood test. I needed to prick my finger and then send it off to get the results. Mm-hmm. I want to talk for a second really about constipation, because I really do know that a lot of my viewers or listeners, because of all the medication that they have to take, they can't, they just can't.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. What can they do, or what can they learn, or what is something that we can, help them with?
Yeah. So first of all, that is, again, the body's response. And if you think about that inflammation, the gut is inflamed and it can't properly digest and get the stuff out. I mean, biologically, that's what's happening. It's getting stuck. And, if someone is on medication that's causing that, the medication is what's causing that. It's not necessarily what's inside the gut to begin with, which is the food. Now, what the medication is doing is trying to subside the symptoms that you're having that are uncomfortable and whatever. And so sometimes it comes down to, what doctors will prescribe is on the other end. They give, okay, so here is laxatives, here is all the things to help you go. And so then that's just more medicine in the body. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. there are lots of foods that can help people to go naturally, like prune juice, right? Old people used to drink a lot of prune juice back in the day because it would help them be regular. Coffee can do that for people, and other foods like that. But if that's not something that's working either, then I would go a little bit farther into what is the chemical, like ask the questions or do the research of that drug, study its side effects, and then decide, if this is my outcome and I'm just going to have constipation, let's say, and it's becoming excruciatingly painful, and then I don't take that medicine and I deal with my symptoms, but I'm willing to address the root cause of those symptoms with good food, maybe there's a chance you can get off the drug and get the gut healthy and get rid of those issues all at the same time. And that's kind of the method that I like to go and encourage people to do, because there's a lot of evidence and research showing you can do that. And that is the quote unquote healing yourself naturally route. It's by eating the foods that help promote good digestion, right? Another thing would be supplements. Supplements can help the body move food, help you, go more thoroughly, more regularly, all of that stuff. And by finding high quality supplements, it can go a long way for people. So I always recommend food first, supplements second.
Yeah. So I want to ask, because earlier you mentioned really that when you look at the gut brain connection, you can see why sometimes the brain is not getting the messages, that we actually meant to receive or that we are trying to send it, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that when we have chronic conditions, a lot of the time, this is when the brain is saying, okay, there is something going on over there in that organ or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know what it is, but there's a lot of anxiety around that. Or maybe this is something that I remember from before. And so I'm going to keep on sending the messages of pain and discomfort and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering, is it possible that if your gut is already kind of out of alignment, can that have that impact, or can that contribute to the brain not recognizing properly what is going on?
It is, and I talked a little bit before about my family history of gut cancers, and that when I did the research about that was when my whole world changed, as far as I then knew I had to really understand and learn the gut better if I wasn't going to go down that same path. So my grandfather had diabetes. His daughter, my mother, ended up passing away from pancreatic cancer, which is the deadliest cancer out there. Only 12% of people survive. It's really scary. Her brother, my uncle, had colon cancer. But as a 57-year-old adult, he was diagnosed autistic. My mother marries my father, who has a family of also gut issues. His father had colon cancer. My dad, after my mom passed, about a year later, told us, "Oh, just wanted you to know my scans are clear." My oncologist said, my sister's like, "Wait, what? Oncologist?" "Oh, yeah, he noticed a spot and I didn't want to worry you guys." Thanks, Dad. "So you're saying that you also had colon cancer?" "Well, yeah, but I'm fine now." "Okay, great." And then I knew what I went through with all of my food intolerances and, all of that stuff, the issues that I had with dyslexia. And this book laid it all out for me. And I was just like, oh my word. I just could see the connections all around me. And like I said, that's where I realized I had a responsibility to change that and to educate. And so for me, it became a necessity. It wasn't just, there was no question. There was absolutely no question in my mind. The other reason why I wanted to do it as an educator is because people have to just think outside the box. Like, we're taught in schools to, follow the method, follow the equation, do the next step, and then sometimes you have to put that down and look out the window, and guess what? There's your answer, right? We have to be willing to do something a little bit different sometimes. And in traditional medicine, for them, that means, okay, this drug doesn't work. Let's try this drug. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's do this surgery. They're not willing to look out the window and see that fresh green fruit growing on the tree. That's the answer, right? And so that's kind of what it comes down to, is the willingness and the ability to be observant and receptive to new ideas and new things. And it is scary. Believe me, this all happened to me in 2009. That long ago, grocery stores didn't carry gluten-free products. They didn't carry sugar-free such and such for diabetics. And today, we are very fortunate in that they have so many things available. Back then, it was really difficult. That said, people have been, dealing with this stuff forever. Think how hard they had it, and how lucky we are today to have come as far as we have. And that just shows me, because we have so many products available, people are finding it really does work when you're open and willing to try something different. And to, maybe I stop eating my bread that I love every day. And, today there's just gluten-free bread. Like, just try that. And you know what? It works. Okay. Like, maybe it doesn't taste as amazing. But look, if your problems go away, wouldn't it be worth it to try? That's kind of my viewpoint, right?
Yeah. I think it's very inspiring, and definitely something that I want to start recommending to people to do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because really what you're saying is that when you're going through whatever symptoms you're going through, if you check really what intolerances you have, and then you start working with these, or like you say, eliminating the ones that come as a red or amber, and then for me that sounds amazing. I mean, I know that in my one, there were some things that came back. It was like, oh God, not that.
Yeah. It's really challenging.
It
And
really
it's
is.
an emotional problem too, right? And so when we're talking about, taking this information and then wanting to have the best life possible, right? We want to live our best life. We have to make a decision. Is this emotional attachment because it makes me happy or comfortable, or it reminds me of my grandma? Is that more important to me than my body functioning well? And when you draw the line that clearly, you have a decision to make. How important is it to me to either potentially get my life back or have a better life than I ever imagined, or to keep going down the same path? And that's why I like educating and encouraging women to be open to the idea of trying something different, because it's absolutely life-changing. It is life-giving, and all it takes is being brave. And that is that emotional issue, right? And so another thing that's going on in the gut, the easiest way to describe it is that little image of the angel and the devil on the shoulders, right? The gut is telling us by cravings or, whatever, eat this, don't eat this. And I know some people that have talked about, I have a voice that tells me to eat blah, 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 because it's my favorite. I learned once that ice cream, dairy, specifically ice cream, the creaminess is some people's craving that need a hug. Like, there's a direct correlation to creaminess and needing physical touch. And so sometimes it's an emotional and a physical at the same time. And that's what's going on in the gut and sending those messages to the brain. And both of those together are what are either helping us or hurting us. And we have to decide what path we're willing to take.
Yeah. So tell me, share with us some, story or two of someone that you worked with, and the results that they got from really understanding this gut brain connection and making the change.
Yeah. So I had a client that I would say she would be a frazzled mom. She had 2 small kids and she did everything that she knew to do. We actually share the same doctor who is open and wonderful. And if you ask her, I'd like to try this other route, she won't tell you no. She will probably still recommend her way, but she won't tell you no. She's quite supportive. Anyway, this mom comes to me and says, my daughter is not thriving physically. Like, she is not healthy enough. Her weight is too low. She was born a preemie. She has ADHD, and she cannot focus. She can't sit still. She's in kindergarten and she's failing kindergarten. We need a tutor because she can't sit still and can't learn. And I was like, okay, great. And now in my mind, when I get there, after that initial phone conversation and all the things, I look around the house and I can kind of understand some of the issues going on. In a lot of moms' houses, when they have young kids, there's toys and things all over. That's absolutely normal. Nothing wrong with that. And I go into the kitchen and I look at the refrigerator and I see a picture of mom and dad from years prior to the babies being born. And they're both extremely heavy. I mean, 300 pounds heavy. And she is not. I'm looking at her and obviously she's had success in something. And she said, oh yeah, that was before I had, gastric bypass or whatever. And I was like, oh wow, okay. So in the back of my mind, I know that they're, starting from a family of probably unhealthy gut. Anyway, so I start working with her daughter and I'm tutoring her daughter and I'm essentially on the side tutoring the mom. And at this time, what I called myself was a parent coach. Now, I'd already been trained in life coaching and I was personally going through health coaching for my own benefit, not even realizing at the time how much having that health coaching would benefit her. And she ended up being my test case in this whole thing. So essentially what it comes down to is I really strongly encourage the mom to think outside the box and see about food sensitivity testing for her daughter and see if there was a possibility that she could have an allergy to wheat and dairy, and just rule it out. And I said, worst case scenario, she shouldn't have those. You will have to change the way you eat. And she said, okay, I know this is going to be hard, but I'm willing because I want my daughter to succeed. And so that trumped it, right? That was the bigger reason. And for women, that works a lot. Like, that is more often their way in because they're not going to really do it for themselves on their own. We just don't, right? We put ourselves last. So because she had her daughter, I use that as an opportunity to then educate her on, okay, so for your daughter to think most clearly in all of this, to respond best, to have less of these episodes of ADHD and all of this stuff, what if we try this? And so she goes and does it. And what do you know? She's allergic to wheat and dairy, gluten, all gluten. And I suggest, okay, this is going to be a lot, but let's try it. And she did. And she did it for 1 month. And she did notice a big difference in her daughter. Now, what was sad was she didn't keep up with it. And the real issue was the family pressure, right? Family member, oh, what are you going to serve? That's gross, blah, blah. And it affected her emotionally so much that stopped her from doing it. It wasn't anymore the need for her daughter to do better. And I'll tell you what, I worked with them for 3 years total. And while they made lots of progress and they learned lots of things, they still stepped back. And it was all of that emotional baggage of clinging to, this makes me happy, or this is what my family, says, or whatever. And she came, anyway, long story short, she came to me 2 years ago and said, my biggest regret is not having stuck with it, because she's still dealing with issues. And I was like, yeah. And it's such a hard choice. Now, I can't tell you that by encouraging her to change her food, I fixed her. No, but I know her mom reported a big difference when she was not eating that way. And if she had continued, I guarantee her gut would have healed and she would have been better off. And that's what her mom came back and said later. And she is now doing more healthy living for the family, which I'm super proud of her for. But it's very hard. And again, it's an emotional, food is such an emotional component, right? And then social around it, that it's really hard to combat that. But when we dig deep and we get brave and we think, what if my life can be better? What if I can feel like I used to? What if this could help me? Why wouldn't someone want to at least try,
Right. But I think something that you said that is very important is that you can heal your gut. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a forever situation. But of course, once you heal your gut, you definitely want to keep on, checking, not to go back all the way to how it was before, but
exactly.
to
Yeah. And you have to know what that line is. So for me, I started adding foods back in when my gut was healed and I wasn't any longer having issues. So for example, corn used to give me headache. So I started adding in corn flour and not get a headache. And then I would add in corn maize, which is another kind of flour processed a little bit differently, not have issue. I would have cornmeal, not have an issue. And then I'd graduate to bigger, and then actual corn kernels. Corn kernels would bother my digestive system. And so I knew that was my line that I could, had to draw. I can't do the kernel, but I can do the flour. And so that helped me a lot, because when I first went gluten-free, also not eating corn is darn near impossible. A lot of gluten-free things are made of corn as a base. And to not have either of those in the beginning, I ate meat and potatoes. That's about all I ate. And salads, right? Like, anyway, I ate a lot of potato. And after that, I was really glad that I could add back in corn, because it just opened up a whole world for me. But again, it's because my gut had healed and I no longer had those reactive symptoms, because the inflammation had lessened and gone away. So the body wasn't responding anymore to all of those problematic foods. Anyway, so when you have allowed enough time to, heal the gut, then you can do that challenge and add the things back in and just see what happens. And often you can add them back in. Now, also, if you're also doing supplements, they have food enzymes and digestive enzymes that help break all of the things down. That also helps it work better too. It's kind of like giving, fortification to the process. It's helping to strengthen it. And so that's another way that you can also aid in digestion. And especially for people with constipation, supplementing can help significantly. A lot of people also that have constipation really are tied to dairy, like that's important to them, or it's a staple in their diet. Constipation is one of the biggest things with dairy. That's one of the two go hand in hand. The next thing is eczema. Dairy can cause eczema in a lot of people. and or rashing, things like that. And so just by, getting very minimal kinds, right? So my family has reaction to dairy, milks. I only buy cheddar cheeses, and that helps a lot. Cheddar is much harder, easier on the body to process than soft cheeses. And so we don't do things like Philadelphia cream cheese or really soft things because that's harder for the body to digest. The cheddars and the harder cheeses are. And so we only get that kind. And then milks and stuff, I just don't even, I get like oat milk or almond milk. And when you're cooking with them, you really don't notice a difference. So it's great today. We have lots of choice today. Anyway, but so those kinds of things literally can be fixed quite easily. But again, the constipation stuff, by just significantly limiting the dairy can also help a lot. And I think that a lot of people just don't know that, because also when our food pyramid was, back in the day when it was triangular shaped, and that it was the second level up, like breads was on the bottom and dairy was second one up, or meats, I forget, meat or dairy. But anyway, they were neck and neck with each other. And that's one of the biggest reactions. And the bottom one was the most reactive. And so that to me also showed it's a no-brainer. Today, they flipped the pyramid, and now fruits and vegetables are on the bottom, because those are the things that help the gut to clean up, reduce inflammation, because of the vitamins and minerals found in fruits and vegetables. So,
but I think it's also important. I've had some people come here, really talking about how they heal the chronic conditions, and like I said before, a lot of them really talk about the diets and how they changed it. And I was thinking to myself, well, how do you work out what is the right diet for you? Because sometimes it can be so complicated to figure it out. But when you say actually just go and do the food intolerances test, that makes so much sense. And I'm really, really happy that you brought that to, reminded us, or brought that to our attention, that this is something that we can all do. We're just about coming towards the end of the conversation today. And tell me, first of all, I know that you have some things to promote. So share with us what is coming up for you, so people can opt in if they feel it's the right thing for them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So basically, I have two things. I have three things in the works. One of them very quickly is I run a mastermind for entrepreneurs, and I have a money mindset coach coming, and it is open to the public. It's just a Zoom. So, but it's very low cost. It's only $37. But a huge portion of that is going to be donated to charity. And so essentially you get to learn about ways to make money and feel good about it, and also give back to charity. But then the second one being, more importantly, in October, it is ADHD Awareness Month. And I have a series coming out, a course. And the course is essentially 1 week long, but it's addressing a lot of these specific issues in order to help women and moms to understand more ADHD today, because it has changed since back in the day when we first learned about ADHD. And I talk about the gut-brain connection in there. I talk about how food and all of that plays as a huge role in how we respond, how it affects our thinking, our judgment, and all of that. And that course is coming out in October. I think it's the second week. And literally all of this stuff can be found on my website. And that's just my name, Paula Tobey, PaulatObey.com. And then my community for entrepreneurs is called the Phenomenal Collective. And that group is for women entrepreneurs who are looking to lead a phenomenal life. And I chose the word phenomenal after Maya Angelou's poem, Phenomenal Woman. And so that's where that's happening. And all of the information goes in there as well. And that's just a free Facebook community. But we are starting to grow and get more members in there every day. And that's where that hub is, where I'm going to be offering this money mindset course, and then also the ADHD course in the future. So I'm super excited about those. And then the last thing is just the noon mastermind. Next year's will be starting in January. So those are the things I have going on.
Amazing. And of course, to anyone watching or listening, all of your informations will be in the show notes, so people can always find out where to follow you and where to get all the information. Paula, this has been incredible. I really thank you so much for being here with us today. Last message for anyone listening. What is the most important thing that you wish for them to take away from this conversation today? Not to put
honestly, you on no, yeah. I would say our gut instincts. And I know that's a play on words and that sounds really sappy, but we have them for a reason. I believe we were created by an ultimate creator who intricately knows us and designed us to be perfect. And in that design, our gut and our gut feelings, our instincts, are part of that. And when we really tune into what those are and we listen to ourselves, that inner voice, and we tune in, they often call it a mother's intuition, right? The same thing. That is imperative for us to pay attention to. And so I would say lean into that and be curious. Ask, why not? What if, right? Be willing and be open to ask those questions. What if? And see what comes out, right? See what you start to feel if you're open and if you're willing to discover something new. And yes, it's scary. It is. But what if it's life-changing, right?
Yeah, very important question. Yes. Paula, thank you so much for being here with us today. Like I said, huge inspiration. And I think, really, you are right. If you're taking this food intolerances test, I think in the UK, the one that I was doing is called Supply Life. I finally...
Oh, yeah, remembered. Yeah, the one that I use here is called Everlywell. Get it on the screen there. Yeah, Food Sensitivity by Everlywell. And it's just super simple, like you said. Pinprick, mail it off. Yeah. Yep.
Really easy. And if this is what it takes for you to then, get the information that you really need, and then, start to eliminating the foods that come up as the red or amber, it's so simple. And anyone and everyone can do this. And
and it's life-changing. And as long as you're open, right? If you're, again, when people are sick and tired of that, they're just like, okay, I'll do it.
Exactly. Yeah, you really have nothing to lose. I mean,
right.
In the UK, I think is around £200 for the test. That's the one that I was doing. But the results were so interesting, and it's eye-opening. And you can now say, okay, I'm gonna, and if this means this is going to help you reduce, get rid of your symptoms and your discomfort, I say, yeah, let's do it.
Why not? Right?
We're starting a movement now.
Well, and truthfully, I believe that we are doing future generations a service by that, because imagine if a lot of our issues that are coming up as chronic conditions, or, learning related and, thinking related, all of that stuff, if we can reduce even portions of that, how much easier it would be for us in our society, right? Not to talk about mental health. Like, one of the other things that this talks about in this book, this down here, schizophrenia. I mean, when you're talking about sociopaths and people that are crazy, it's because their gut is not healthy. Like, that really affects the brain so much that it controls everything. And again, they've known this forever, but they're just now putting all of this together and realizing, unfortunately, our food industry is the driving factor for us being where we are today. And it's a matter of making that choice, right? Like,
Yeah. So that's the incredible things of really sharing this kind of podcast and bringing it to people's attention and awareness and really creating that change.
Mm-hmm.
We got to finish, but thank you, Paula. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom and your inspiration. And like I said before, all of your information will be in the show notes for people to follow you and find out more. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. I really appreciate you having me on today. And I just have to say, you are amazing. I love your energy. I love all that you bring to people and your passion for helping people discover all of that emotional stuff underneath. I know when you were on my podcast, we talked a lot about that. And I absolutely love what you're doing. And I cannot wait for you to bring stuff to the community, the phenomenal community as well, because I think you have a lot of great things to offer. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.